Welcome, everyone, to the Awful Takes podcast, where I share my awful takes with all of you guys. And then I put it in an hour-long format, and I force people to listen to it. Everything I say is an awful take, so yeah, that's the name of the show. My name's Nabahi.
Hello, I'm Wallied from Sir Gator Productions, but that's not all. We also have a special guest joining us today, so would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey there, my name is Nate Aragon. I'm the titular bad guy from the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 soundtrack, which I do want to point out I never said was bad. I just said could have better songs. So that was my only take. Could be an awful take. That's why I'm here.
Yep, Nate is here. We are all here, and I'm excited. Before we start talking about the movie we're going to talk about, I've known Nate, like Dylan, for around 4 years, and I met him when I was training at Starbucks, and Nate always seemed like a really cool person, and I remember very early on, he said a joke or quoted Invader Zim. And I don't know why. That's like one of my favorite like animated cartoon shows. So when I heard it, I immediately was like, wait, what the hell? I don't hear anyone quote Invader Zim. So it's like from that moment on, I was just like, that's so cool. Like I've never really talked to anyone about that show besides a handful of people I know. But yeah, Nate was always someone who is very knowledgeable with, movies, anime, things like that. I would definitely say he's more of an anime watcher than I am. So obviously it was such a natural fit to have him on as a guest. I guess technically at one point I was Nate's boss.
That is true, yes.
But also on the other end, I guess technically you were my boss at one point.
We have traded boss positions before.
So how are you doing, Nate? How are you feeling?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited to be here. Thank you guys for having me on.
Awesome.
I'm honored,
of course.
honestly. I'm excited.
Nate's been plugging us to everyone.
It.
So
pushing that grind.
All the customers that show up, he hands them our QR code.
I do. I tell them, hey, have you listened to the Awful Takes podcast today?
But yeah, I'm very excited to have him on. I guess just we'll briefly give Nate a little intro. Obviously, with guests we have on, they recommend, a movie or show that they would like us to watch. And we go from there. But before we get into it, Nate, I guess running through some general kind of topics, like what are some of your favorite movies and shows, things like that, just so that the listeners can get an idea of, what you like.
Yeah, man. Man, if you've ever met me, if seen me in person, you'll probably find out that my favorite movie is Princess Mononoke by far. Man,
awesome.
Hell yeah.
God, the visuals in that movie, the storytelling, even just Miyazaki's a genius. We can go on about that for forever, but man, that movie has a special place in my heart. But even with TV shows and things like that, I've always kind of gravitated towards animation. Like, obviously I love anime. It's just so cool.
Do you remember the first anime you watched?
I do actually. It's Full Metal Alchemist not even Brotherhood. It was it was the original, the one that they kind of spitballed as they were making it.
Dang. How old were you when you watched it?
Whew, man, I was probably maybe 10, 8 or 10. I remember my brother was super into anime. He was watching, Naruto and the original Fullmetal Alchemist when it was coming out and stuff like that.
Wow.
So he kind of turned me on to anime when I was at a young age. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
And do you know when it kind of like grew into like, you started wanting to find more shows, films, things like that?
Yeah, it was, I remember at the time, like, streaming wasn't as big as it is now.
Yeah.
So it was kind of hard to find, like, even now you can't find Naruto, like, dub anywhere. Like, you have to go buy it. But,
yeah.
At the time, you had, like, Funimation and stuff. And I would, me and my buddies back in middle school would watch anime and talk about it. I remember Attack on Titan was super huge.
Wow.
It was just starting to come out and things like
that. And did you, because I know for a while there, it was like, there was always like people who watched anime or people who would read manga. Would you say you were someone who did both? Like, did you read manga as well?
Not as much. I definitely watched a lot of it. The first manga I read actually was Full Metal Alchemist.
Dang.
I remember reading it right as I had finished watching the entirety of Brotherhood at the time.
How many books is it?
it's like 20 something. It's really long, but it's really good. It follows it pretty much identically because obviously they finished it and then they did the show like normal.
That's cool.
But yeah, it was really good. And then I didn't really start reading a lot more until I got a little bit older, probably around end of high school, things like that.
Dang, okay.
Because normally I won't normally go out and like buy like a manga for like one that doesn't have an anime adaptation rather. I kind of prefer to just watch it and then compare it with the manga.
I'm the same way. Like I notice a lot when I finish an anime, that's when my interest kind of like, okay, I want to read. I want to see how this is adapted. I remember shortly after I finished Death Note, my girlfriend bought me the box set, and I remember reading it and just like I was so obsessed with it. I was just like, I want to read more, you know?
Yeah, you get really sucked into it, I think.
Yeah, and it's like there are so many times when I'm at where they sell manga and like seeing like those big books of like Akira and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I want to buy them, and then I look at the price and I'm like, oh man.
Oh yeah, so true. And things you never would have thought had like a manga. Like I'm walking through and I see Legend of Zelda, the manga.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh shoot, I'll read that. No, yeah. It's funny.
Right?
But
or
yeah.
like the Kirby manga.
Dude, yeah, I gotta know what's going on there.
I guess another question I would want to know is obviously you said you started watching like Full Metal Alchemist, but do you have like a favorite show, maybe anime or regular show?
Speaking of, no, that's definitely what like even now like a strong like show that I'll throw on just to have is like regular show or any of those old Cartoon Network shows.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
But I definitely think my favorite anime, especially right now, definitely Demon Slayer. Like I hate to like ride the Demon Slayer train, but dude, I mean you can't just. It's just so perfect. It's just so peak.
I really like Demon Slayer, so I'm right there with you.
Right.
Like call me a hype beast or whatever, or mainstream anime watcher. I don't care. I'm like I love that show.
No, yeah, and I'm not gonna sit here and say that the old ones aren't great. Like I love those, but man, like especially with all the, as big of a business as it is now, like they invest so much money into the the animation and things like that. So you get to see such cool like sights. Like I remember watching Shippuden and stuff like that at the end and being like, whoa, like these are some really crazy fight scenes. But
and I think I don't know. Sometimes you can tell in terms of art and things like when something is trying to attach themselves to like the mainstream rather than the mainstream kind of finding it. You know, and I think that's the case with Demon Slayer. Is just like. It doesn't really feel like a by the numbers kind of thing for me, you know? Yeah. So it's like when I watched it, like there was a lot of stuff that for me anyways, that felt really like kind of unconventional, you know? Yeah. I always remember watching Demon Slayer and like I'd skip the intros and stuff because Netflix has that little blurb. So I'd just click on it, and then the character introduction to Zenitsu was one of the most like what the F moments I've ever had in anime. Dude. Like the whole time I was just like, how did this guy like make it through this, you know? Yeah, and then in like the credits they kind of show like his powers, or they kind of spoil it.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I had not seen any of that. So in the moment when it's revealed like how his powers work, I was just like laughing. I thought it was like the funniest, like coolest. Like I was not ready for that.
It's such a change. Like you really don't expect it. Obviously, if you read it or like you watch the intro, you're like, yeah, they tell you.
Yeah.
But like, you're watching it, you have no idea what this dude does. You just know he's some yellow guy.
Exactly. And I'll still attest, like the year Mugen Train came out, that was my favorite movie of that year. Yeah. So like I don't know. Like like I said, call me a mainstream follower or whatever. Yeah. I don't care. That one worked for me. So yeah, awesome. Really glad you're here. Nate, you recommended to us a movie that actually we have mentioned before on this podcast. I think in like our third episode.
It was our hunt episode.
Yeah, we kind of mentioned the topic came up of movies that are like really amazing, but you can only kind of watch like one time, at least for me. And we had mentioned this movie. So Nate, why don't you go ahead and tell us what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, by all means. So I recommended A Silent Voice, which is an animated film that came out in 2016. Ironically, the same year as Your Name, which I think is kind of important.
Awesome.
I think it was definitely a big year for all the animation out there. And one thing I do want to quick bring up before we start getting into the movie is the immense disappointment I feel for the fact that it was snubbed for an Academy Award nomination in place of Boss Baby, which that's I mean, need I say more? That's
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's kind of a.
Sorry to any Boss Baby fans if you guys are
Everybody
listening.
who's loving Boss Baby,
but there's no way that should have happened.
Yeah, I mean, Your Name. I mean, like, it was the same year and everything.
Crazy.
I digress. But I mean, I love this movie. I've seen it probably dozens of times. I mean, it's a movie that you sit down and watch, and the first time you watch it, it's definitely a very uplifting, obviously a melancholy story, but
Yeah.
it has its moments that are really inspiring and add to the kind of emotional core of the film. But I also
Definitely.
think that it, upon multiple viewings, there are so many details and small things that you'll pick up on and notice, and it just paints such a very realistic point of view about social stigma,
Yeah.
and just like bullying, the effects of that. And
Yeah.
it delves into some really serious issues.
Not to mention like the mental like impacts of all that too.
Yeah, and a lot
It's
of
it creates kind of mental health issues in people and things like that, and not even to mention like the guilt people feel
Yeah.
for doing that kind of stuff is immense.
I agree. I definitely agree. The main character, Shoya, his name is Shoya Ishida, I think is such a well written character in the sense that he is relatable to the point where, you grow up as a kid and you're rambunctious, you
Yeah.
have your, you do your kid things, and, eventually one day, like, you find out like the world isn't kind of how you see it when you're a kid. A lot of stuff can come back on you or come down on you. And that's what can really be shaping for someone, especially as they're growing up. And things like that. I think they do a good job of making him both likable, but also extremely frustrating at times. You know what I mean? Which, we can all be. So I think it definitely paints a good picture of like someone that would realistically be in his scenario.
So where did you first hear about this movie from? Like, was it something that someone recommended, or did you like find it on your own?
I don't actually remember 100%. I remember when I first watched it, it was on Netflix.
Yeah.
I think we were just watching because for the longest time, like right before and during the pandemic, me and Dylan would usually just sit down and watch movies. Like that's all
wow.
we would do. Like we've seen so many interesting, to say the least, horror movies. Like we've seen a bunch of we've seen a lot of stuff. So, but this one was really stuck with me because we were obviously on on a little anime kick watching. It's like Toradora, things like that. But yeah, this movie, eventually we watched it and it stuck with me. To this day.
Wow.
Like it's one of my favorite movies for sure.
And that really showed, like, again, like, obviously people can say a lot of stuff with Netflix and things like that, but I will say I appreciate them for getting movies that are kind of harder to find, lesser known, and really kind of bringing them to the mainstream, you know? Or at least giving the chance for that to happen, because it's like, I remember when this movie came out, like all the other animes, it's like, it showed in movie theaters one night on a Tuesday randomly, and then it was gone, the week after. So it's just like you really have to know, you have to kind of pay attention to when movies like this and stuff are coming out. So yeah, I guess if you just want to give like a kind of like a plot summary of what the movie's about.
Yeah. So the movie opens up with sorry, like not to go on a side tangent, but the score on this movie is great in my opinion. Like there's so much emotion that's given through the soundtrack, I feel like, in this film, and even in the storytelling. For example, so in the beginning, it opens up, we see this kind of like blurry blob kind of looking thing, and you hear a little bit of a score picking up, and then it shows the full scene of you see this young man walking down the street. He's dressed up very nice, he has a suit on, and he's just walking along a bridge. And then the story kind of starts shifting between this character that's past that you start to learn about to what he's doing now. Now, this movie is heavily about suicide and suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation, things about that. So it is a very heavy film to kind of digest if you're just kind of looking for a cute anime movie to watch. I probably wouldn't start with this one, but
it really will pop up in that recommendation, and just looking at it, you might be like, "Oh, this looks like
it looks real cute." Like, oh man,
but be ready, guys.
Right? Yeah, but man, there is a lot of emotional depth here. I mean, you kind of even just by visually can kind of tell like what's going on with this guy. I mean, you see him walking along the bridge, and it's cutting with these scenes of him doing a lot of things that normally are signs of a planned suicide. He's selling off his stuff. He's, repaying old debts that he has. He's, I mean, it even shows like visually he has a calendar in his room, and he has all his days marked. And then one day, the day that it is today, it literally just says last day.
Wow.
And it's circled. And the rest of the calendar, you find out later, was completely ripped off. Like that day was supposed to be it. So you kind of understand what he's planning on doing, what he's thinking about doing. It shows a scene that I think is really powerful, and it definitely adds to the story. Is he's standing on the bridge, and he's like, his arms are out, and it's showing this like golden hue, which I think is a lot used a lot in the movie to kind of tell that this is something that he like. I wouldn't say dream about, but he definitely idealizes. It comes back a lot in the movie, and I'll probably get back to that later. But it just shows him like fall, and then a firework goes off, and it kind of snaps him back to reality, and it shows that that's kind of what he was thinking about doing, what he was planning on doing. So then it immediately goes from that very somber scene to My Generation by The Who, which is a great song.
Wow, yeah.
Which, man, kind of weird to see in that movie, but really good. I think it actually added, because it shows, it kind of jumps back to the very beginning of the story, which is him as a kid. Him and his friends are all in 6th grade, and they're going about their normal school life. Shoei is kind of this punk kid. Like he's you can tell he's just like real rambunctious. Him and his friends do like stupid crap, like jump off bridges and jump into rivers and play with beavers and stuff like that. So you kind of get that whole scene. I felt like kind of gave you a really good look at the personalities of a lot of these characters that come back up in the movie. You kind of see like shots of them interacting with each other. You get kind of shots of like kind of how they go about their daily school life at the time. And then obviously we get introduced to probably the most important character of the story. There's a girl. Her name is Shoko Nishimiya. She walks into the classroom and is being introduced, to the class as a new student, and she just stands there. And you and the kids are obviously like confused, like, oh, like what's going on? Like she's not saying anything, like. So even that you as the audience are kind of confused, like why she's just kind of there. And she doesn't look nervous or anything. She's just like sitting there smiling. And then you find out they like tap her, and she pulls out this notebook. And this notebook is really important because it's a really big driving part of the movie, that she writes in this notebook for talking to me, pretty much. Like, this is how you're going to communicate with me. And so she's flipping through this notebook, trying to introduce herself through pages she's written on there. And you find out she's deaf. She can't hear anything. So obviously if you're a 11-year-old kid, 12-year-old kid, like that's huge. You've probably never seen that before. And I think that's definitely how Shoya feels. I mean, it shows like his reaction to this new force in his life, I guess you could say, that like cuts him like super off guard. He's like, whoa, like he literally says like, holy crap, like it's a new kid. But yeah, man, I don't know. It definitely it shows how just like how cruel kids can be, I guess, in a sense. Like you can really see like how these kids interact, and you just really it does a great job of making you really feel for Shoko, because she didn't do anything. She's just deaf.
Yeah,
like she's not like she can help it or anything. So she off rip, you can kind of see how it's hard for these kids to kind of grasp what it's like, for someone to be deaf and not like they can't hear anything. Like it's a hard life. And she has help, obviously. Like she tries to get like her classmates to help her out write in the journal, but even then, like they show that like these kids are frustrated that they have to, you know, kind of quote unquote like conform to like help this person out. They kind of feel like it's not fair, like she's getting special treatment. But definitely you can already see like there's teasing, like Shoya and his friends, forget their names because they're not there for a super long time.
Yeah.
But they're just like they just love to pick on her. They kind of shift their attention to her because she's this new student and she has something so huge like that makes her like stand out, that they just kind of go jump on that. And it's just rough because that whole like child scene really just kind of shows, like, I think it points out a good character point in these people where a lot of the time they're not like trying to be facetious. I don't think. I think it's more, I think a lot of this stuff that happens as they're a kid is it just spurs from like ignorance. Like they don't understand what that life is like, or, you know, what it's like to have such a disability like that.
Yeah.
And things like that. But
Yeah, they can't like sympathize with her.
yeah.
Almost.
And I think
it's smart for them to show that too, because it's like, you know, kids, it's, you know, they're naive, you know,
Yeah.
it really is just something that they can't empathize with, or, you know, put themselves in someone else's shoes. And it's only when they get older where you kind of realize, dang, what was I doing? And it's very smart to show that. Obviously, everything Nate's describing, it's like, keep in mind, guys, like this is like the first 15 minutes of the film.
yeah.
Really heavy stuff is kind of being thrown at you. And I don't know, I always like it in animes. I notice it a lot with animes in general, is just this kind of non-linear kind of storytelling. Like obviously the intro is when he's older, and once the information kind of starts to unfold, that's when they start taking steps back. I think it would have been not as strong if that intro wasn't there with him on the bridge, you know. If they would have started with them as a kid, I feel like you would have that detachment with him, and you wouldn't really want to find out more, you know, because I gotta be honest, the stuff he does is just, man, it is.
Yeah.
It's hard.
He
like,
does. I mean,
like I wrote it down. Like there's this. Okay, like I'm not lying, guys. Like there's a little. It's maybe less than a minute of a little montage. This might have to be the worst montage I've ever seen in my life of what this guy is doing to her. Like, oh my God, it's just like, how does this go unnoticed? How does no one, you know, realize what's going on? Yeah. And I don't know, explores the aspects of everything, of like, you kind of have your main aggressor, you have your bystanders, you have people, you know, authority figures, and it's like, how is this whole incident, you know, viewed across everyone? And I really appreciate the film for showing that, because I feel like most other films wouldn't really take the time to do that. I feel like they would probably kind of focus on just the victim and then the bully, you know?
I agree. I think
I don't know. It just really feels like kind of authentic, I would say.
I agree. I think it definitely shows that in most cases of bullying, like it's not just
The
you know,
bully.
the bully, the
It's
bully and the victim. There's
Like a lot of the class is kind of just teasing. They're also kind of part of the problem too.
A lot of enabling, and that's like a big part that comes back later. Is because obviously that whole montage of him like doing this like really bad stuff to this poor girl.
One of the saddest scenes
Dude,
I've
it's,
ever
like,
seen,
super
where he
sad,
like
and
pulls the earplugs out, and
she
it's just
starts-
like you start seeing like the blood. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so heartbreaking that like for someone to go through something like that, especially because it's like you said, it's not like she wanted this. You know?
She never
It's-
asked to.
And it's like every time like that threshold is kind of pushed, like Wallied mentioned, like with the bleeding or things like that, it's almost like, okay, like, come on, like, how is that not a sign to be like, I should probably stop?
Yeah.
But it just keeps going, and it's just like, oh man, like this is this is rough. And then the principal comes in with the teacher, and he's like, basically said like, who's been picking on, you know, Shoko? It's like, oh, she's lost like 8 hearing aids, you know, and things like that. And it's just like, oh my God, like I can't like. And then of course, now that the principal's there, now the teacher wants to do something.
Yeah,
you
that's.
know?
I was gonna say that
just
teacher is like.
I'm like, come on, that's how it is though.
Yeah,
It's like,
and he never really made an effort to like really shut down all the like
Yeah.
bullying and teasing. I mean, even when she's like, and oh man, there are some scenes that are so hard, and because obviously because she's deaf, she obviously has very distinct speaking patterns.
Yeah.
Which are highlighted in the film. I mean, it's really rough. That choir scene.
Oh yeah,
Is really hard to watch because I mean obviously she's trying her best, but it's not like you know what I mean. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just goes back to things like that where kids will completely like mercilessly pick on her for like, stuff she can't even control, obviously, and then the teacher's not there to shut that down or help.
Shows that like sign of just neglect almost, like he just doesn't even care, you know.
and that's like, I don't know, like. That's something I appreciate the film for, is just like bullying and things like that, picking on people. Like some people can very much tell, like obviously we're adults now, where that line kind of is drawn and when you cross it. But when you're a kid, you kind of say things lightheartedly. You don't really see it in that same way, and it kind of takes someone, obviously like an authority figure, to kind of point that out.
Yeah.
Like what you're doing is wrong, teaching kids about empathy, not just thinking about yourself, is very, very important, you know? And obviously that scene with the teacher, it's like, okay, now he's calling out Shoya. Yeah. But it's like, you knew this whole time, because he says, he's like, come on, we all know it's you. And I'm like, why haven't you been doing anything?
This
you
is
know,
what you say.
It's only now when your job is on the line or whatever. Now he wants to speak. I don't know. That just really bugged me.
I think it was also a good way to show, like, man, when the chips are down, like, you don't know, like, because everyone turns on him. Like, every single person, they're like, yeah, it was him. Like, he was doing all that, like, immediately. I mean, he tries to obviously kind of, like, disperse the blame, be like, hey, like, come on, guys. Like, you can't put all this on me. Like, you guys were all there too. You guys all laughed and we're doing it too.
Yeah.
And one character who comes back and is like a big part of this movie, but I hate her. Okay, I hate her. Her name is Miki and she sucks. Okay, she is such a whiner. Like she acts like she's this super nice, like empathetic person, and she is in a certain sense, but like someone will say some really messed up stuff. And she'd be like, wow, what? I can't believe you said that. And I'm like...
She's like the perfect example of like a gaslighter.
She is. Like, she's such a victim at all times.
She just points the blame everywhere. She never takes responsibility for anything. Yeah. And she's and especially in the second half, which I won't get into, like she just basically ruins like Ishida's life and everything that he was working for at that moment. I'm like,
dude,
dude.
And I don't know. I appreciate that they show all these points of view, but one thing that I do like is none of these characters really feel like archetypes in a way. Yeah. They don't really feel like standard, like, oh, here's your bully, here's this, broken down in those boxes. Yeah. It's only later when you realize when they're older, it's like, that's kind of how I was acting, like the girl who kind of helps Shoko a bit, of writing in the book and stuff. Yeah. And it's just very quickly shows that, oh, she's actually no longer there, just a quick cut and you realize, damn, she's gone now. Like, what the hell, Yeah. And then obviously later on, it kind of comes back, into play of just what does that own character now self-reflecting think about how they were acting. Yeah. What else could they have done, Mm-hmm. But yeah, that first 15 to 20 minutes is so heavy. Like it is, man, it's
hard to watch, man.
Yeah,
like
watching
you're
it the first time.
Ooh, yeah.
Like I'm telling you, like when I first saw it, it was like I kept hearing about it in the online, review sphere and stuff. And I've always been like big into physical media and stuff. So I waited for it to, release on Blu-ray and see where I could find it. And I remember when I saw it in Best Buy, I was like, oh, great. I bought it right away. Same thing with a lot of other anime movies. And I went home to watch it, and after that first 20 minutes, I was like, I don't want to keep watching this. It was so hard. But obviously, like Nate says, there is a very uplifting side to this movie as well. So after that whole kind of intro, and it jumps to them back when he's an adult and stuff, or older, not fully an adult. That's when the tone kind of shifts,
Yeah.
But I will say, like what Nate was saying with the music and stuff, the music does not feel manipulative in any way to kind of influence you and how you're thinking, because it's like, again, that whole montage, it's some of the darkest stuff I've seen.
It's just like this campy piano,
but the
playing where it's all-
music is like doesn't indicate that at all, and it's just like, wow, this is like, they're not really trying to like force me to really think about it.
I agree. I think they do definitely a good job of using the score to kind of show how the characters kind of view the situation and what you see. And the way I kind of
that makes sense.
base that off is like, especially like, I mean, obviously all that bad stuff is happening, but I think it's just to kind of show that, these are kids. They think that they're being funny. They think that they're having, a practical joke, laugh, whatever.
Yeah.
And even in like when obviously Shoko's introduced, I mean, you have a normal, this is a heavy piano score, which I really enjoy. And I think it adds a lot because, I mean, at least for me personally, when I think like melancholy instrument, I usually think piano. And so I think it adds to it, but that's neither here nor there. When she's introduced, Shoko, like obviously you're playing a little bit of, the score, and then it just goes completely, when she walks in, it goes completely silent, which obviously, I mean, for storytelling purposes kind of makes sense. I mean, she doesn't hear anything, so that would make sense. But I do think it's a good way that they kind of show that these people kind of have their own soundtracks in life, if that makes sense. That might be a little bit of a reach, but I do think that they did kind of use the story to show the emotion of the character, that they're trying to focus on in each scene.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's one thing I love too. I love the sound design in this film a lot, especially with like when you get like Nishimiya's perspective and you kind of hear that like the sound is just kind of more muffled, just so you can kind of get in like the shoes of that character. I really loved that choice a lot.
Yeah.
And it just kind of shows you how much like they care about a lot of the characters in the film.
Going past the intro, when it goes, well, not just the intro, but that whole sequence of him as a kid, and now he is matured, and now he's having that retrospect of, okay, I've tried to correct things in my life, but this is something that I've not really like sought out to fix, So he kind of takes it upon himself to be like, okay, I want to make this right, And after that intro sequence again, it's a challenge. If you're going to show your main character do this stuff and act this way, how are you going to redeem that and make him feel like he's worth rooting for, I guess.
Yeah, a lot more likable.
And then they touch on it with him, and obviously his plan to kill himself and everything was something that was going to affect his whole family, Like that was... It doesn't seem drawn out or anything. It's very kind of like to the point, but that was also just like a really like great way to, okay, you saw that, but now you kind of see how he's feeling, and you see the guilt he feels, because I'll be honest, like that's something that really works for me in this movie. In middle school, I didn't bully a deaf kid or anything, but I was kind of an asshole and I was kind of a dick, and I remember coming out of middle school, I had the very distinct feeling that I didn't really like who I was. I wanted to act different. I wanted to be, kind of like a nicer person. But I kind of shunned just people away in general. It was almost like you want that and you want to start acting that way, but you don't know how, And that was something that hit with this movie a lot, is just seeing how he is as, a matured person looking back. It's hard for him. It's hard for him to interact with people. It's hard for him to talk and try to make amends. He's someone who has like very bad like social anxiety. He's someone that has a hard time like making eye contact. And especially you see it as the movie goes on, but when they do the point of view shots of him, and it's just very simple. Like he's looking down at the ground, like at people's feet, you know, and it's just like this guilt of like, am I even allowed to feel happy? Am I allowed to, you know, try to make amends and make things right? Amazing like filmmaking in general. And then obviously one of the great choices, having all the people in his life have that blue X on them is just like, that really is how it feels. Is just like you almost don't see people as people, you know, you're just so reclused, you're so cut off from everything that you're in your own space, you know?
I agree. I think it definitely shows a really like realistic and kind of like deep perspective of someone that's like that. I mean, you see Shoya, and you can, I mean, anybody that watches this, you know, can kind of see a little bit of themselves in that sense, where it's easy to go from someone that's very outgoing and, you know, whatever, and then, you know, something bad happens or some kind of traumatic event happens, and I mean, he completely shuts himself off from people. I mean, he obviously, I mean, it's visually shown with those X's, that he just considers everyone like, I think it's to more show that not that like no one cares about him, but more so that like he wouldn't or doesn't deserve to like know these people or like talk to these people, or just to kind of show that he has built this wall between anybody. And they even show it in the movie, that it's not even that people don't talk to him. It's that he just he just doesn't see them as someone that he could actually like be forgiven. Like, I think it just shows that he carries that guilt so heavy for that whole time in his life. I mean, it kind of shows, you know, tidbits of what happens between you know, when they're kids and then to the present.
He has these assumptions about a lot of people too, especially when you see like when he's in high school, you kind of think that he thinks that a lot of people are like bad mouthing him, and that is a thing that does happen with social anxiety. Is, you know, you make all these random assumptions when it's like it's not really true, and it's just kind of more all in your head. I would say, you know, so
because he definitely has his own internal dialogue of what he thinks that people are, you know, how he thinks people view him, instead of like how they really view him, which I'm sure most of them probably don't have like a negative
feeling
about him. Yeah, but he just, you know, carries this guilt so heavy that he just kind of thinks that everyone else hates me, and, you know, they're gonna turn on me just like the people I thought were my friends when I was a kid. And it's easy to carry.
He has a lot of trust issues too because of that whole incident and everything. And there's a scene I love towards like the end, where they go to like the amusement park, and he starts like kind of thinking to himself like, am I allowed to be this happy? You know, and it's just such a hard hitting scene, you know, to feel like this is probably like the first time in his life that since that incident where he is experiencing happiness again, you know, and it's such a beautiful moment.
It is too.
And you can be like, I don't know, really like the past and stuff, your actions and things, like, granted, maybe they weren't anything like too, you know, traumatizing towards you, but you can be traumatized by what you did,
100%,
you know? And those thoughts just still ring very clear as you get older. You know, you have a better understanding of, okay, that's who I was and that's what I did. This is probably what I put that person through, you know? But seeing him, obviously, when he goes to that school that Shoko's at, and like first seeing her now grown up, it's almost like he still can't even see that person.
Yeah,
he remembers the kid, you know?
Yeah, it even shows it. Like, he still sees her as this, you know, this little deaf girl with like, you know, messy hair and walks around. And now he's seeing her now after this many times, and he's already like terrified. Like, he doesn't want to talk to this girl, or rather he feels like he needs to, because like this was it. Like, this was his last day to wrap things up. And I think it's a really good, I think it also shows how, okay, I think Shoko is the best part of this movie. I gotta say, like, she is such a ray in this horrible, horrible movie of just sadness and despair. But yeah, it definitely shows how like, cause she's always been a very kind girl. You can tell. Even when like, they're teasing her and things, she always has a smile. I mean, they do stuff to her and she'll be like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't mean to make you like this. And it's really frustrating. Like you see how like poorly she's treated and her to still come with this like big heart and stuff like that. And then even when they reunite after a long time, you can see how they painted on her face, which I think is really cool. How conflicted she is by seeing him again. Cause at first she's like super surprised, like, oh shit, it's you. And then, she tries to give him like a smile, like friendly. And then she kind of like pulls back and is like, wait, kind of remembering everything. And you can see she gets a little frustrated. And then at a certain point, she's just like, I don't know, and just runs off. Yeah. And so he chases her. And I love that whole interaction, them kind of reuniting is so like, it's hard. It's hard to get past like, all that stuff that like was brought up. I mean, I can't think of a more awkward situation than going up to the person you like tortured as a kid and being like, hey, here's your notebook. Like, I don't know.
I think a perfect example too also is like the scene before she leaves the school where it just shows her character. Like she tries to just like clean his desk after,
that scene is really powerful.
And it just shows her like she's still like just super optimistic. She wants to be friends with this person in any way that she can. And Ishida, obviously, he's still just like super just ignorant and just kind of like just bullying her. And it's just such a heartbreaking scene where she's just like almost trying to fight back almost, So I think to kind of show that scene and then like the scene where they finally do interact as adults or like as teenagers again, I think is like a kind of a perfect way to show like how strained that relationship was.
Because I definitely think it has that like that sense of the whole schoolboy crush kind of cliche where it's like I like you, so I'm gonna like bully you. And I think that's like obviously taken to an extreme here, but I think it definitely paints a really good picture of how he really was just ignorant. Like his whole goal, and I think is a big part of this movie, was he really wants to just understand her and like know why she is the way she is, why she's so kind. Because I think a big thing was like he hates being like pitied when he was a kid, at least. Like he just it like hits his pride, and so he starts like just fighting her for no reason after she's helping him out, and she gets to a point where she's like I've had it, and she's like she speaks and she's like I'm mad at you. Like I'm doing the best I can. Like I can't. Oh, that whole part is so sad. But I do think it shows how like she's a very kind person, and is going through all these hardships, and so you really feel for her as a character, even just like how she's treated. But
and the thing is too, also that I love that the film explores in the second half with her character is that she's going through a lot. Like she's really sad, and you even see towards the end when they're having that like fireworks party, you see she's not doing well.
And it's not even, and like a lot of stuff happens to them, like you said. Like it's just because there's a scene where a family member like passes away and they're having to deal with that, and then it's just kind of like a cascade of stuff. You see her visit to the so I forget the name, but the ear doctor. She pretty much goes to
the audiologist.
The audiologist. And then they obviously give her really bad news. Like I'm assuming, like they don't say it, which I think is a really good.
It's a perfect example of like just showing, not telling. And it's still just so heartbreaking.
They do a lot of that in that movie, and I think they do it really well too. It's just kind of like giving the audience visual storytelling, and in a really good way, and especially like that. Like even though you don't hear what's being said. You can tell she's with her grandma there, and you can tell the grandma is like devastated. And then she looks at Shoko, and Shoko, you can tell it's just, you can tell she's trying to keep it together. And I think that's a lot that's being shown in the movie is Shoko always has this kind of like smile, but she's really just trying to keep it together. Like she struggles a lot, just like all of us.
Yeah, she's hiding and like just bottling up a lot of her emotions. She doesn't really know how to express a lot of it, especially because she has a hard time speaking and she can't really hear.
And it's so hard to be. I can't imagine being in that position where you want to communicate your feelings, but it's so hard. I mean, you can't obviously you can speak, but it's hard to speak to someone like that, and then obviously like not everyone knows sign language, so
Yeah.
it's a very big wall she has to constantly live with, and I think is like just another testament to her, like her strength. She has such hardships in life, I can't imagine.
Yeah, even the scene where she's like confessing his love to Ishida almost, and he just misunderstands her, where he's like, "Oh, the moon, that's beautiful," which is a little comedic, but it's like, oh my god, it's like also sad because it's like he doesn't know what she's trying to say,
and she tries so hard too, and I think it's funny because I think the dynamic is really good too between Shoko and her little sister, Yuzuru, which is shown obviously at the beginning.
That reveal too, is
it
hilarious.
was just crazy because it's funny because you're introduced to Yuzuru, and she's this little tomboyish girl, probably in like middle school or lower, but she's literally just like this kid that's like so protective of her older sister because she feels like she needs her because she's deaf or because she
feels responsible for her.
Yeah, she almost tries to adopt the older sister role, being the younger sister, which is interesting. But I think it's also important because it doesn't even necessarily show like too much of what goes on in their domestic life, but you can tell like it's not peaches and cream either. You know what I mean? Like he literally finds Yuzuru, the little sister, like in a playground sleeping because she ran because Shoko was like, I don't need you to be doing all this for me. Like
their mom is super strict too.
Yeah, and their mom, her mom is such a complex character too. I think it's hard for me to sit here and say like I hate her because she's so like emotionally like complex. Like, can you imagine having raising like a child by yourself with such a huge disability, and then you're trying to provide for this kid, and this kid's constantly getting harassed at school every day, and then now you have another kid, and so I feel for her in that sense. I do think yes, she's like super strict and like hard boiled, but I feel like at a certain point you kind of have to be that way, just to kind of defend your family like that. But even like I don't know, I feel like especially like because obviously he meets his her little sister and they become good friends, and you kind of see the way that this story is told, like how this group of friends comes to be really organically through Shoko. Because I mean the whole movie starts with him saying like, this is my last day, like after this I'm done. And then obviously he goes to make amends with Shoko, and he asks her like, can we be friends? And obviously there's a little bit of comedy, like slaps himself because she like kind of like blushes a little bit, and he's like, "Phew." but he says it right there. He's like, I get it now. Like that's what you were trying to tell me, was just like, I just wanted us to be friends, like kind of thing. So
that's one thing too I also like really love about a lot of his characters, that even though yes he did do a lot of terrible things, like when he was like in middle school, he's trying to learn, he's trying to improve, and he even learned sign language just so he can try to like make amends with her. Yeah. And I think that's just such a powerful thing for a character to do, is learn from those mistakes and try to be a better person in any way that he can. Even though what he did was just super unforgivable, he's still going to do everything he can to get out of that like suicidal like place, but also just trying to be a better person for her and trying to just be at peace with her.
And I think it's a good, I think it's a good thing that you brought that up. He definitely like is doing all this for self-improvement, and one thing I think that is really important is Yuzuru kind of calls him out on that. And so at the very beginning, obviously she's very defensive about why are you trying to talk to my sister kind of type thing, like but she calls him out right away, like she's like, if you're here to make yourself feel better, like beat it, like you shouldn't be. And so that kind of, you can tell it hits him, and he starts to kind of think to himself, like, is that what I'm doing? Like, am I just trying to make myself feel better? But it comes back because he obviously helps her little sister out. She's walking home in the rain. He kind of goes to help her and all that stuff. But she kind of calls him out again and is like, you're doing all this. Like, you even learned sign language. Like, you must be really like, you must think we're pathetic and like pity us. And he's like, no. He kind of explains his viewpoint, and I think is what kind of really paints him in this really good light too, and kind of shows how he views this whole situation. Is he's like, I might be being selfish, but I just don't want to make her cry anymore. Like, I don't want to hurt this person anymore. Like, I spent my whole childhood years like traumatizing her. Like, I feel really bad. But he's like, yeah, like maybe I'm being selfish, but I just want her to be happy, pretty much is what he says.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that, I mean, instantly flips her opinion of him too, is being like, okay, I think this guy's kind of, you know, genuine. He really does want to like make amends, kind of make things better.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think a little bit extra comedic is that the little sister is kind of like playing matchmaker for him, which is really cute. I think that, it's just funny. But yeah, leading to that scene where she's trying to confess to Shoya. It's obviously very hard to watch because it's really awkward, but also this movie does such a great job of having Shoya be this likable and like relatable character, but you get so frustrated with him because you're just like, oh, guy, like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, but I don't know. I think it even like, obviously throughout the movie you get introduced to some more characters, and like I said, this circle of friends kind of grows, but each of these people kind of have their own way of helping Shoya and Shoko in a way kind of grow. I mean, he starts off with like obviously no friends, like everyone's an ex, like I can't talk to any of them, and series of events happens that kind of makes him, you know, become unlikely friends with this kid, this green-haired kid. His name is Nagatsuka. That's his name. Forgot. But he's good comedic relief, I suppose. But he really is just kind of that like character of like, oh, zany kid that you end up being friends with, and I think is a good way to just kind of show that he ends up finding all these people and reuniting with a lot of his old friends, because he ended up having this ultimatum that he gave himself, where he was like, I'm gonna make everything like right before I check out, pretty much. And obviously, thank God he didn't do that. I mean, it goes on to kind of show like, you know, he made these improvements, and you know, things are organically getting better. Mm-hmm. And then the movie does kind of lead obviously to a backtrack where something happens between the friend group, because their original plan is to make a movie. The Nagatsuka, he's kind of like he's like a filmmaker. He wants to, aspiring filmmaker, I should say. And he wants to make like a summer film with all these people. And they're like, okay, well, let's do it. So it's kind of their glue that lets them, you know, be friends, I guess. And I do wish, because the manga does explore that a little bit more, like that being the central plot of why they're all together. But I do think the film does a good job of showing like, yeah, they're here to make a movie and like, you know, do whatever they're going to do. But they are kind of unlikely friends. Like they all kind of do grow closer together. But yeah, some stuff happens. Miki sucks as usual. I hate her.
God.
And she kind of, I'm not going to say she ruins everything, but it does show that I think it's really important is that for someone like Shoya, it's very easy to still have improvement, but to take a step back and still like shut yourself off again. I mean, he literally shows it like the X goes back on their face. Mm-hmm. Like he has written this person off as, I can't know this person anymore, which I think just shows how hard it can be, you know, for like someone with, you know, social anxiety like that. And it's just like, I shouldn't be allowed to talk to this person, or I shouldn't be allowed to, you know, because I said this or that. It's really hard. And so there's tension between that friend group towards the last half of the film, where obviously they've all gotten together, they've kind of reunited, you know, hashed out their, you know, stuff that kind of went on. And you can kind of see even in the storytelling, there's a lot of like still of that tension. And that's kind of what brings up that, you know, that moment that creates a rift between all of them, is like, hey, like we're cool and all, but there's some stuff that like I'm not gonna sit here and like talk about, but we all know like we're not like, I'm not gonna forget that, you know. And I don't know, I think it's just it's hard for everyone, because I feel like Shoya has a very very bad habit of putting all the blame on himself, but I think it also is because it stems from that whole experience that happened when they were kids. Mm-hmm. He's very quick to take all the blame and like, oh, this is my fault, or this can't even happen because I'm here, type of thing. So I don't know. I think he's very complex. He has a lot of stuff going on, and obviously, I think what the film does a really good job, kind of getting a little bit more towards the end here, is I mean, you've been watching this whole movie and you're kind of following, obviously, Shoya, who's the main character, but I mean, obviously, like, Shoko is very important, and, you know, their whole dynamic as a friend group. But I think the writing in this movie is really good because you follow Shoya a lot, and then, you know, they become friends, they start doing this, they start hanging out. There's a little bit of implied romance, all that good stuff. It's very uplifting. It kind of makes you feel like, oh, okay, like I understand, like this guy's getting better, like things are getting better. And then we get to, obviously, towards the end where we have a tragedy happened in Shoko's family. They're dealing with that. He's obviously there to help, but he can only do so much. And I feel like at a certain point in the film, it kind of shifts its attention more to Shoko, which I think is a good way to kind of show that, like, hey, yes, he's trying to make amends to Shoko, but us, like Shoya, as the audience, are kind of thinking we're not as invested in Shoko's feelings at the time. I feel like, especially on your first watch, like you're following Shoya the whole time, and then Shoko just kind of there to be like super, you know, cool and like the reason. But especially towards that fireworks scene that's there, I mean, you start seeing all these small signs that are real life signs, especially like in the beginning. Like I said, they do a really good job at giving people, you know, these are the kind of things that people that are planning to do something as drastic as taking their own life, like, start to kind of do. And so you're watching this and you notice this, and it, you know, it's a very climactic scene where Shoko leaves. They're all at a fireworks festival together, and she leaves. Like, this was it. She's all dressed up. She has her she's all dressed up and looks nice. They're all watching the fireworks, and she leaves. She's like, "Oh, I have to go study." And Shoya obviously can tell something doesn't feel right, and he also has to. Well, Yuzuru. Sorry, wait. I'm back. Let me backtrack. Sorry, Yuzuru had a really good way of, like, obviously has a reading of her sister, and she does a really good job throughout the whole movie, kind of empathizing with her sister. I mean, a very good plot point for her too is the whole photos thing, but that's another level of storytelling, I think. But it leads to this climax of basically Shoko goes home, Yuzuru tells Shoya, like, gives him an excuse to go there, like, follow her and make sure that she's okay. And it shows a very deep parallel to the beginning of the film that we were talking about with Shoya on the bridge and everything like that. Like, it even showed, like, fireworks are going off, and it switches to this, like, hazy golden hue that it does throughout the film, where even when he was talking to Shoko for the first time, it kind of cuts to that, where he has this view, and a lot of these characters in this film have this view that's, like, hazy, that shows that this is what they're, like, kind of thinking about or, like, wanting to happen. So, like, he wanted her to be friends with him, so he started, like, dreaming about that. Or in the beginning, he wanted to die, and so he was dreaming about that. And then so it shows to this beautiful scene of all these fireworks and stuff, and he walks into the Shoko's house, and she's on the ledge. And obviously, like, it's a very emotional scene. Like, he immediately, like, panics and is like no, like, because he knows, obviously, like, he's been in that situation, he's been on that ledge, and before he can even think, he's running to go stop her. And obviously, you'd have to watch it. It's a very emotional scene. It's very good. I'm not gonna, like, get too deep into it, but it does have a very big turning point in the film, because after everything happens and after that whole situation, like, they both at the same time have this feeling like they need to talk to each other and they need to, you know, see each other. And it leads to this really heart-wrenching but, like, really sweet moment between the two towards the end of the film, where they kind of hash out their entire feelings that they've had this whole time for each other, and kind of what they've been trying to get from each other. And it seems like, and I think Shoya says it the best, he's like, I want you to teach me how to live, which is so sad and so good, because man, that scene. And I think it just shows also, just even in the story, like, that's all he wanted, was to understand her. And I think he's grown more understanding of her, obviously, but at that end, I think is a really good moment that shows like how much he admires her and like how much he's like, you've led such a hard life. Like you always have a smile. You always have this, you know, you're always kind. Everything happens. I want you to teach me how to be like that. It's pretty much what he asks of her. He's like, I want us to live together, pretty much is the whole thing, which is very sweet, very, oh God, gut-wrenching, but I think is a really good like way to have all the emotions that have tied up in that film just kind of climax. And
I think it really encapsulates, like, for me, the most important part of this whole movie is, yeah, like, Shoya, obviously, like, it's told from his point of view and his whole character and everything, but I think what really rings true and to me just feels like the message of everything is trying to teach people to be more like Shoko. She was the one who has been enduring everything. She's the one who has been turned into a victim throughout this whole thing, yet she's the first one to kind of open herself up to forgive Shoya. And it's like, that's so important. You know, it's like anytime there are people who, we all make mistakes, everyone makes mistakes, you know, but you have to be open enough to realize that, hey, maybe they want to change. Maybe they want to be a different person. Yes, what they did hurt people I care about. Yes, what they did forever affected my life. But if they want to change and if they want to, you know, seek out forgiveness and things like that, at some point we need to help enable them, you know? And to me, that is the most important part, that maybe we need to be more like Shoko and realize that people do stuff they're not proud of, you know? And seeing that and seeing her reaction to everything, to me, is just one of the most important parts of this movie, because you see it in other movies, you know, that's not really like focused on. Bad characters are forever like kind of treated as bad. They're always treated as villains, I guess, in an overall story, but it's like they're people too. Sometimes they have, you know, reasons as to why they did what they did, whether they were naive or immature. We need to open ourselves up to that. And then just realizing overall, like, this is a story about redemption is so important. And I don't know, that's always some of my favorite things in movies and stories in general. Anytime that, you know, you have characters who aren't the greatest, but if you can build up that feeling of redemption with them, to me is one of the most like rewarding things in storytelling. Taking that villain or that evil character and making me root for them is such a big thing. And I think it's just worth being applauded for, you know, like that's a very hard thing to do. But yeah, like when that line comes up, it's like, we need to get there, you know? We need to think more like Shoko and realize that the people who are wronged by this stuff, sometimes they are going to be the ones to teach us these lessons, you know? But yeah, that was great. The writing was so good. The music and everything was so good. It was just hitting on every level, and it's just like, man, this is unlike anything I've ever seen.
No, seriously, that sound design, like Wallied was saying, is like, it's insane. Like even in that scene where we talk about the fireworks, like,
oh my God,
just this way the sound like quiets down and shows the impact of the moment, like what's going on and everything like that. And
I like, I don't know, the reveal of everything, like him running, and he hits the freaking table, and then he's like laying there.
It really makes you like sit there and get like as hype as this character. You're like, oh my God, like get up, and you know what I mean?
And then like the clothes on the wire, and then it like folds and then unfolds, and you see that she's not there anymore. It's just like, oh my God, like what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
Oh man. But yeah, overall, I don't know. This is just an amazing movie. Yeah, I enjoy it so much, and it has such a great message, and just really hits hard, you know?
Yeah.
But I think compared to some other movies, it's not just entirely focusing on, you know, the sad aspects of everything. Again, like with Shoko, she's a very, like you said, like just kind of this ray in everyone's lives, and you know, maybe we need to reframe how we perceive things and put ourselves in other people's shoes, you know? Really great message. Yeah.
I think they do a really good job of making you feel very sad, like bringing down the emotion very much, just so they can show you like how big the impact of the the positivity that comes later on in the movie is. Like, I think it kind of shows like not all growth is gonna be like instant. Like the course of the movie takes place over however long time, but it just shows how slowly the growth, and like it leads to this climax at the very end, which has the best song in the entire soundtrack. Oh my god,
it hits.
Man, I can't even, like, the name of the song is Lit on parentheses Var, which makes no sense. Like, the soundtrack titling makes no sense, but man, it's very bombastic. The drums and the orchestra that comes in like during that song, like it really adds to the emotion of the scene, which is, it's a testament to his growth, because he's at this school festival with all his friends. This is all after everything that had happened, after the fireworks and everything like that. It shows how he's internalized everything that he's learned after such a harrowing experience, like finding out about this stuff. And man, that scene where he's sitting there and he's with his friends, and you can tell he's like starting to like enjoy it and like enjoy life, and you see his viewpoint of all these people in the festival, like all the X's fall off their face. I think it's just so beautiful. Like, it literally is so, you're watching this and you yourself feel so freed, because that's what it feels like. I'm sure like it's such a relief to like not have to feel like you're walking on eggshells at all times, and kind of be open to these other people in your life. And
it's such a great sense of relief, and it's such a perfect way to end the film, where he's just bawling his eyes out because he feels free from this social anxiety. And it's, oh man, I cried like super hard,
dude, every time.
That.
I cannot.
And it's like the way
so
you feel it,
beautiful.
like pretty much lift off of him. It's just like now, like he can start living. He can start moving on from that place that he kind of put himself in. Obviously, just seeking out, to repair this relationship. Like that drive to push him there, and to want to, redeem things. It paid off. It paid off, and because of that, he's a much freer person.
It feels like he's closing a chapter into his life. It's like now he can move on from that grief and that trauma and just let go. It's like he's, I don't know, to me, it feels like he's found inner peace. Which is probably one of the most beautiful feelings you could have.
I mean, and it's shown so beautifully. Like he literally, like you said, like he is so overwhelmed with this like this relief, this feeling, that he just starts like bawling, like crying. And if I would too, if I were him, like you look back at this movie after watching it for the first time, and I think it really sticks with you. At least for me, like I left, that first time, and I felt this like in my heart, like, oh my gosh, like what a story, like what a beautiful piece, where it shows like such growth in these people, and such an inspiring story, and like all these different viewpoints that just culminate so perfectly. It's one of my favorite movies because it's so emotionally deep without like leaving you with a sense of like sadness at the end. Like it shows, like obviously not every sad movie needs a happy ending, but but I think that this one is so great at showing how they earned that happy ending. Like you've seen all these characters' experiences, what they've dealt with, how they've gone about their lives, and it leads to this very positive, very like uplifting climax at the end, and it's just beautiful. Like it's really, I love that. I just love it. It's just so emotionally driven.
It's surprisingly so hopeful from just everything that you've gone through. It's just like, it feels like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders. So.
It's so much. I didn't, like Wallied said, I cannot watch that scene without crying. I tried listening to the soundtrack on the way here, right? Okay, so I listened to that song, and I could feel the tears start welling up as soon as that, like, because what I'm telling you, at least when, I'm not gonna sit here and say like if you've seen it like one time, you're gonna know everything, obviously.
Yeah.
But like once you, oh man, like you know what scenes are correspond to which song, and I think that's a testament to the score itself. Is like I said, they fit so well in each scene because they're trying to convey what's going on. That obviously when you hear that song, I'm ready to cry. Like it's just gonna happen.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know. I think it's a very beautiful film. I think it was so overshadowed by Boss Baby, and which just sucks. But I do think it was a really good year too. I mean, we
Oh
had,
my god.
Curse you, boss baby.
dude, God, curse you. But yeah, even with Your Name, and I love Your Name, but I'm sorry, like I've seen this movie way more. And I relate to this movie way more.
And that's one thing I was gonna mention is the director Naoko Yamada. Like she's, I don't know, her vision and everything is just, it's just something you wouldn't think of, you know. Like again, like showing this whole story and the way she chose to go about it, like it really rings true, you know, and it really feels genuine and unique. And it even hit the director of Your Name, Makoto Shinkai, to really, it was almost like he was jealous of, you know, how good a storyteller she is, you know. And it, you know, like he said it in an interview, like he's like, I know I shouldn't feel that way, but I do feel jealous, you know, of how great, you know, she was of a storyteller she is, you know. And yeah, like it's just something like, since this movie, it's like I've just been like ready to see more from this director, you know. And obviously she has a movie coming out now in Japan back in August called The Colors Within. And again, whenever it happens, whenever it wants to come to the US, like please, like I just want to see it in the theater. And I just want to fully just immerse myself. I really regret not watching this in the theater because that, I could just imagine the sound of the music, you know, the big screen and everything. Must have been amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I even to the point, like, yes, I love Your Name and everything, but like this is just, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. You know, it really, really hits hard, and yeah, it leaves you walk out a different person after watching it.
I think it definitely shares that sense of growth with the audience really well. Like you leave that and you've taken something from it for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those films where I feel like after the film is over, you just want to be a better person. You want to
It's very
improve in some way, shape, or form. And I feel like those are like the most powerful types of films where it just gives you just such a new perspective on life.
Yeah.
And for that and many other reasons, it's just such a heartbreaking, but just such a hopeful, powerful film about grief and about learning to let go of trauma and just self-improvement. It's probably one of the best portrayals I've seen of that in any film.
I agree.
Overall, I can't recommend this movie enough. Yeah, it's really hard to watch. Especially again, that beginning and everything is just heartbreaking. But again, I feel like it has that other side of hopefulness to it, you know, compared to some other movies that I feel are like just super depressing and there's nothing like to pull you out of it. So I really recommend giving this a watch. I think it was taken off Netflix recently. So I don't know exactly where you can find it, but definitely seek this one out. And hopefully her next movie comes out here in the US because that's something I would love to see and talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she's a really great director. And I just look forward to more. I guess overall, if I was going to give this a score, I mean, I don't really have any problems with this movie. And granted, I haven't read the manga, so some of the stuff you were mentioning about some of these other storylines and things that weren't in there do really interest me. I actually want to find out more about them.
It's quite interesting.
Yeah,
the stuff that goes on after.
And I think it can add like an even another layer to everything, you know. But in my perspective, I haven't read the manga, so I don't know exactly what is being left out in terms of this adaptation. So for me, everything just really works. The voice performances, the music, the direction, everything really, really really hits hard. So I'm just gonna give it a 10. Like I can't think of anything I would want to improve or take out in any way. Everything really kind of works for me. So
Nice.
You know what's crazy is that this film is like 2 hours, and not once do
Yeah.
you feel the runtime at all. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
you're just super invested. But yeah, this film is, God, this has to be one of the most powerful films I've ever seen. It hits so hard emotionally and personally, and especially in the second half. Like it really just feels like fireworks,
Yeah.
almost. Yeah, everything about this film I think is just perfect. I love so much of the characters. I love their growth and their arcs. The animation is so beautiful. It still
yeah.
holds up even though it's like almost 10 years old. The music is so gorgeous. It makes me cry even just thinking about it. I have some of the score in my head and I'm just like, my God. The sound design is so incredible, and I love that you get to see both sides of the coin. It's such a powerful, well done film. Yeah, I think it's a 10. Honestly, it's so. God, it is so incredible, and just even me talking about it and trying to hold back tears right now, it is it's just one of the best endings I've ever seen, and yeah, it's a genuine masterpiece. I love this film so much.
Nice. Yeah. See?
Yeah, it's a 10.
Nate, what are you thinking score wise?
I agree. I mean, I'm coming in here. I'm gonna sit here and already say, like, even just visually alone is so beautiful. Like Wallied was saying, like it is so good at painting these. I mean, the emotion of these characters that are animated, and you feel for them, and the soundtrack is just absolutely immaculate. I mean, it's so bold when it needs to be, and yet like there's such a duality in the quietness that's supposed to be there as well. I think perfectly meshes with the story. So I obviously give it a 10. Like this is such a perfect movie. I'm literally sitting here. I've seen this movie like 50 times, and I'm trying to think of one bad thing, and I can't. Like it just holds up. I think so well. And
flawless.
I think it's just such a testament. Now I do wish. Back to the manga, I do wish they did a little bit more of the epilogue. I do think that the pacing of the story in the movie was perfect. They did leave on a very good note in the story. Like, this is very uplifting. This is what happens. And obviously, if you're curious on what happens with the characters and what goes on there, then I do recommend reading the epilogue. It kind of delves a little bit deeper into what happens after if you're interested. But
I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, but I love this movie. It's one of my favorites for sure. It's in my top 5, 100%. So,
Wow.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys liked it as much as I did.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It was great.
It hits so much harder on a second watch.
That's what I'm saying.
know.
This is a movie I recommend people watch multiple times for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things that came up that I sent you, and Wallied brought it up, and I just think it's very interesting because this movie did really, like I said, it's unique and it feels like kind of its own thing. And does its own thing with these characters and this story. But how do you feel like bullying overall is like portrayed in film, Because like if I'm being honest, outside of like a handful of movies, sometimes I feel like it's too removed.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really feel like authentic. I think the only other time that I've felt like that is in a movie I saw called Moonlight. It shows bullying to this very like, kind of like awful degree of what it's like,
Yeah.
and just wanting to stop being like a victim. But again, like with this movie, it shows that other side of someone who did these acts and everything, and how do they, try to fix it, I guess. Is that even possible? Can you fix it? So I don't know, like overall, like how do you feel like in film, like bullying when it's portrayed? Do you feel like it's done good, or are there instances that you can name where it's just like, come on, this is a writer,
right? Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that for sure, this movie, in my opinion, has been the only piece of media that has been the most realistic. In the sense of bullying. I mean, because you look at any kind of movie where it takes place in like high school, for example, or anything like that. Obviously, you have your bully character that's just there to like antagonize and obviously that's there for the plot and, you know, whatever story. And I don't think I've never thought that the bully has ever added anything substantial to the story. Like, you know what I mean? Like, especially to this sense. But man, that's one of the things I love about this movie is that it gives such a realistic and relatable perspective about everything that's going on. I mean, it even paints like, imagine how Shoko's mother feels, like, and it shows that. And then obviously like this kid bullied a deaf kid and like, you know, got his just desserts if you want to say that. But obviously he holds this huge amount of guilt and it carries with him and it's very important to him. And I think it's such a good show that like, yes, these people can do horrible things. Like he did like terrible things, but they still understand that what they did was wrong and they still feel this, you know, sense of remorse about it. And another thing that I want to call back on earlier, we were saying is that, like it was very deep and affected him a lot. And then it's brought up by one of his friends in the friend group. Her name is Naoka. She's like, she kind of sucks too, but she kind of like brings that up. She's like, hey, sorry for all that stuff that happened. Not that it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think is one of the more important quotes in the story too, because it can be like that. Like you can have something that's affected you so deeply and, you know, has hindered you or like, you know, affected you in this way. And other people just they're not as affected. They don't have that perspective of.
I really like, as much as I hate her character, showing that other point of view of someone who doesn't really want to correct what they did and doesn't really see it as that bad is important, you know, because there are those people, you know. And again, like bullying in film, like it's so, I don't know, like I can't stand it when the freaking victim out of nowhere spouts off like this monologue of I'm putting you in your place, bully, and everyone kind of like
It's a little corny.
yeah, it's just like, come on, that's not how that happens. And then the bully's like a servant to the victim, you know? It's like,
oh man, see?
it's like, come on. Like, I hate that in movies, like that trope and everything when that happens of like, this is the moment of the nerd getting back, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's done in like different ways. Like obviously like one that I wouldn't even say it's like being bullied or anything, but like, you know, the nerd correcting everything, like Napoleon Dynamite when he dances on the stage at the end, you know, it's just like, okay, like you're kind of saying that, but you're not outright just saying it, you know?
It's subtle.
Yeah, because I hate it. Oh my God, there's so many instances, and sometimes I enjoy the movie overall, but those scenes like really just bother me.
Yeah.
There's a movie I really love called Sing Street. It's about like, you know, kids writing music in the early like pretty much like 60s to 80s era, and there's a scene, obviously the kid's been bullied a lot, but there's just this scene that just feels so like Hollywood, and it's just like him spouting off this monologue to this bully. And past that moment, the bully's no longer a problem. And I'm like,
You're like, okay.
I can't
That's
stand
not how
that.
that works. Yeah.
I don't know, but how do you feel, Wallied, like with bullying in film and stuff? Are there instances where it works, or is there a lot of instances where you feel like, come on, this is too removed?
I feel like my biggest issue with it is like a lot of the time it feels kind of more like you said, kind of Hollywoodizing it, or like it feels like just kind of over the top where it's just like, okay, this isn't like super realistic, but I feel like it depends on like the tone you're going for. So I feel like if you're going for a more comedic tone, I kind of let it pass. But if it's kind of something that's taking itself a bit more seriously or like is more of a drama, I kind of take issue with that. Like I know this is kind of not the best example, but I think of like The Amazing Spider-Man and like that whole Flash Thompson thing where he's all, not today. I said not today. And it's like, that's kind of corny. It's a little cheap. It's just a bit much. But I feel like the best example, honestly, is just A Silent Voice. Like Nate, I really can't think of another film that's portrayed bullying in such a grounded, more kind of realistic tone that's a lot more mature compared to a lot of other films that I've seen portray bullying. So I feel like if you're going for a more comedic tone, like sure, I can see you doing the over the top thing. But if it's something more of like a drama, I'd prefer if you kind of tackle it like you're gonna tackle maybe like a serious issue, you know, because I feel like bullying is such a serious issue, and I feel like a lot of people tend to kind of glamorize it almost.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would just say overall, I do wish that something more films, especially for films that are portraying mental health in high school, could do a better job of, you know,
Yeah.
especially even getting maybe more the bully perspective.
Yeah.
I think would be like a lot better. But that's how I feel like we still have ways to go with bullying.
And the
portrayed in
problem
film,
is
but, yeah.
you know, the landscape is always changing, you know, like bullying now is probably really different compared to how it was back then, you know?
Yeah.
I think that was one of my issues with Amazing Spider-Man is just like, this is like a very much like a 60s bully, you know? Like just being a
cartoony.
dick for no reason. And not even to mention the actor looks like he's freaking 30.
Yeah.
Every time I watched that scene, it was so funny. I was watching it. My brother's like, that looks like a teacher beating up a kid. And it's like, it's so true. But yeah, like bullying and the landscape is always like changing. So it's like now bullies might be more subtle with how they do things, and they might try to affect you a lot more emotionally rather than physically and stuff like that. But yeah, I feel like this movie again, like it's so layered and it handles all of those different aspects and how it could evolve, you know?
Yeah.
Again, like some of the characters you hate, but I'm glad they're there because they show that other side of, you know, what
Very
it's like.
necessary perspective. For sure.
And then not even to mention like just the bystanders, the ones who are watching and feel like they should stop or do something or say something in a way.
They play
they
a part
don't.
too.
Yeah. And then not to mention the authority figure, the teacher of someone who just simply ignores it, you know, and it's just like, I'm not going to make a big deal of it until I have to.
Yeah,
you know?
I think it's a testament to that write-off of like, oh, kids will be kids, like that these like adults kind of have in that movie that just is what kind of perpetuates what's going on. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like a very good commentary on that.
Really though.
Another thing, one thing I do enjoy, and another thing I see in a lot of movies about a trope about bullies is always like they never paint them in a sympathetic light like this movie does. I think I feel like a common thing I always see is they're just like, oh, this kid's a bully because his dad is abusive, or like his parents are abusive, or like something happened, and it's like, yeah, I understand that like that can lead to that and that's that, but I think that this movie does such a good job of painting this, you know, this bully character as another person. Like they have their own experiences. They might not have had like a horrible upbringing. They just do things a specific way, or like have their own understanding of, you know, life and you know, what's acceptable and what's not. So
it's very easy to have just like a plot reason as to why a bully does what they do, you know? Just, ex-dad was abusive, you know, or didn't have a great upbringing, things like that. And
They
it's
got
like,
picked on.
Yeah.
and it's just like sometimes
okay.
people act a certain way just, I don't know, because they're naive and they don't think they're doing something bad, you know? But yeah. Overall, really enjoy this movie. Can't recommend it enough, guys. Like, please check it out.
It's an emotional ride.
Emotional
Man, for
ride.
real.
But it's worth it. It is worth watching. I'm gonna have to check out the manga for that epilogue. Actually,
man.
that sounds freaking awesome. I didn't know that was. It went past that point, so I'm like, ooh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, a little bit of what's next.
But yeah, I guess we'll end it here. I know Nate's a very busy guy, so he's gonna have to press on. But thank you for joining us, Nate, and thank you for recommending this movie.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. I was really excited to be here.
Yeah, and we're gonna have Nate on soon, and we'll probably be talking about something that's not as depressing, so we can see the other side of Nate. I don't want to completely spoil something that I really want to do, but it kind of is like the whole reason as to why I made this podcast. Nate, obviously, right now we're very agreeable on everything, but there are instances where we don't see eye to eye, and I feel like Nate has a very great way of bringing up those points.
Thank
and
you.
stuff.
I've had some very passionate debates, we'll say, with some of the previous guests. So I would love to, I'd love to, see them again and talk to them. See what's going on there.
But thank you, Nate, again for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, sir.
We hope to have you
guys.
on
Thank
again
you.
very soon.
Yeah.
And everyone, please check out A Silent Voice. Don't know where you can find it, but hopefully you do. If you see it on Blu-ray somewhere, check it out. Man, that's so depressing.
Just buy it. That's what I did. I saw it. I went, I'm gonna buy it.
I
bought
saw it in Best Buy, and I'm like, now Best Buy doesn't even carry movies anymore,
it. Yeah, and we're at the end of the disc era. We're
That's
going to
so
digital, which is so
depressing.
sad. Yeah,
Oh,
that was
man.
funny. That's another thing too. Is like as soon as I saw it, I was like, I watched it, and I was like, yeah, I want to hold this forever physically,
Yeah.
so I bought it. Yeah, so
It's weird now. Like, you go to Best Buy, and I'm like, oh, they have vinyls, but they don't have movies.
Yeah.
That's like, whoa, where are we living right now? But thank you guys. Hopefully this episode gets uploaded pretty soon, and we will catch you on the next one.
Good day and good night, mates.
later.